What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So Riot has finally revealed the visual and gameplay update for Nunu, who will now more appropriately be known as Nunu and Willump. As with all visual gameplay updates, the rework was essentially just a reimagining of what Nunu and Willump should be as a champion, drawing inspiration from the original kit but really exploring the potential of characters and trying to make the gameplay a little more exciting. So today we'll be taking a look at his new look and then jump right into his gameplay, what's changed and what he's going to bring to Summoner's Rift. And this video is going to be sponsored and edited by ProGuides.com. ProGuides is a guide website with the intention to helping you become the best player that you can be. They recently released a new and fun way to learn League of Legends. You can choose a course to study and earn points for answering questions with personalized data tracking. And you can also talk to a challenger player to get personalized help or ask questions 24/7 at any time using the website. Try it for free at the link in the description, and let's jump right into the video. The Nunu and Willump update has some really fresh new visuals, and although there's probably a lot of people sad to see the old Yeti appearance gone, Riot has always preferred straying away from the typical folklore stereotypes. The new Willump looks like a mix of a bear with a little bit of an Eastern dragon look to him too, and although it's not what most people expected, I gotta say, it looks pretty good. There seems to be some heavy where the wild things are influences here, and even Nunu himself is looking a lot more human than he did before. The overall theme is a lot more wholesome too than it was before, which is a pretty cool move from Riot because the game has definitely been lacking some of that original lighthearted feel. But the most important thing with any rework is of course the gameplay, and it seems like Riot have finally delivered on our wishes for a fun, unique kit that doesn't allow him to do a million different things in the game. And it seems really simple actually, and the old Nunu theme has definitely still been kept alive, it's just been made a bit more viable and hopefully more fun to play. Let's get into it, starting with his new passive, Call of the Freljord. When he damages an enemy champion, large monster, or structure, Willump and a nearby ally gain a few seconds of attack and movement speed buff. It's kind of like his old W, I guess. The ally with the highest attack speed is prioritized, so it's going to hopefully buff your AD carry, and Willump also gains a cleaving effect for a portion of the damage he deals with auto attacks, hitting all enemies in the immediate area, which gives him a nice little bit of help with his jungle clear. The ability is really reminiscent of the old Nunu's Blood Boil, of course, which was commonly used on ally marksman champions for the amazing attack speed buff. He won't be able to use it on demand anymore like before since it only triggers on certain attacks, but it should give Nunu a much more reliable jungle clear, especially with the cleave effect, and allow him to join up with an AD carry later in the game for some strong pushing power after a gank. Nunu and Willump's Q is the same old Consume. He takes a bite out of the enemy, dealing true damage to monsters and minions and giving him a big heal. However, there's two extremely interesting changes to this ability now. Firstly, it can now be used on enemy champions, and this was kind of a big drawback of picking Nunu because aside from the objective control that you get from essentially having a second smite, any fights against enemy players, you kind of just have one less ability than everyone else. Consume can now deal magic damage to champions with his bite, so it won't be as much damage, but every little bit helps. Nunu and Willump will also gain much more health if Consume is used on an enemy when they are low health, so it'll be a really powerful tool for sustain, especially in that first early game jungle clear. It's a pretty significant buff that maintains the simplicity of his old kit, but makes it a lot more effective than it was before. Replacing Nunu's old Ice Blast ability is a brand new take on a snowball spell. It's called the biggest snowball ever, and as the name implies, Willump will roll up a pretty massive snowball. The snowball grows in size and speed as Willump rolls it up, and crashing it into a wall, champion, or large monster will damage and knock up nearby enemies. You can also reactivate the ability to send the snowball rolling forward in a straight line, damaging and knocking up minions in addition to champions and monsters. The amount of damage dealt and duration of the knockup both increase with the size of the snowball. This ability looks like a super fun replacement for Ice Blast. It honestly seems like something that's just going to be so hilarious to play with. It's a little bit more complex since Ice Blast was of course just a point and click spell, but it preserves a lot of the same gameplay and just makes it way more fun. It was kind of frustrating to play against Nunu's old Ice Blast because he'd just spam it and slow you every few seconds, but this one looks to have a lot more counterplay. It's similar to Aurelion Sol's Q in many ways because the size increases over time, but with Nunu you can actually steer his snowball around the map, so it's a lot more versatile. It looks like a great, amazing tool for ganking or teamfighting, and thanks to the reactivation, you could also just send it rolling down a lane for some pretty decent wave clear too. With the attack speed buff being moved to his passive, that frees up a new ability slot that Riot is putting to good use with Snowball Barrage. Instead of being another Willump ability, with this ability we actually get to see Nunu himself doing some of the work here. Nunu rapidly flings up to 3 volleys of snowballs over a few seconds, which damage champions and monsters and mark them as snowbound. Enemies hit by all 3 snowballs in a volley are briefly slowed, and then when the ability ends, all snowbound enemies, so essentially all enemies that are hit, near Willump and Nunu are briefly rooted. Despite all the fun with his new snowball, this ability is really the bread and butter of the rework. It's honestly insane because it gives Nunu so much more ganking pressure and more crowd control to use. It combos really well with his W snowball ability because the knockup is going to make your snowballs just really easy to land, which can then be changed into an additional root and then a big bite with his Q. Again, the simplicity is reduced a little bit when compared to the original Nunu, but given the fact that he's essentially got an extra 1 or 2 abilities to use in team fights, it's well worth it, and although he's got some more counterplay now, overall it seems like he's going to be stronger for sure. Last up, we've got the iconic ultimate, Absolute Zero. Now for the most part, it's kind of just exactly the same as his old ultimate. It can be cancelled and used from the Brush or Fog of War without revealing Nunu and Willump. The range does seem to be a little bit lower than before, but they also get a shield now, which will allow them to tank through the channel a little bit better while you're standing still. The changes are pretty minimal, but it was one of the most exciting parts about playing old Nunu, so I'm definitely glad to see that Riot stuck with this ability. One thing worth mentioning is that we'll actually synergize really well now with all the new crowd control that he has, so maximizing the damage from Absolute Zero should potentially be a little bit easier than before, especially if you got an ally to help chain some crowd control with you. From looking at just his abilities on paper, it seems like Nunu's going to be really good fun to play, maybe a little bit less frustrating to deal with than the older version 2. He might not be particularly strong in the current meta with really powerful jungle camps like Graves and Kindred around, but his ganking potential has definitely been improved a lot, and he seems to have a lot more tools at his disposal for sure. Keep in mind that Nunu used to be a champion that you would kind of just pick to counter jungle and really not be all that useful, where your goal was to make the enemy jungler even more useless than you are. That's definitely changed now, and he could even turn out to be kind of broken thanks to his gank potential and objective control if Riot have the numbers a little bit overtuned. For a powerful early game tank jungler, Nunu and Willump might prove to be a better choice than someone like Sejuani, Rammus, or Skarner. It kind of depends on how much damage he can do, as well as how efficient his jungle clears are. He also has a huge early clear advantage, of course, though, because of his passive and consume, so it seems like his jungle clear is definitely going to be really strong, and then he can move into, more of a supportive team fighting kind of support role later on in the game, since he has 3 abilities that have a crowd control effect. No doubt he's still going to be a great counter jungler too, which is going to be pretty fun to watch as he rolls a snowball through the enemy jungle. His team fighting ability seems to be a lot better too, so picking him together with strong early game champions and forcing early game fights with that attack speed buff might be a way to snowball him to a win quite effectively. Overall, I have to say that this Nunu honestly feels really strong. He looks really strong. I mean, it's going to depend a little bit on the numbers, of course, but in terms of his gameplay mechanics and the design of his kit, it seems on paper that Nunu is going to be pretty strong on release. Either way, that's going to be it for our thoughts on Nunu and Willump's rework. I'm definitely interested in hearing what you guys think of him, especially if you maybe spend some time playing him out on the PvE. Apparently there's a few tweaks that are going to be made before his final release, but most of those are related to visuals, so gameplay should be pretty representative of his final version. Either way, it looks like that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.